Hey y'all, I hope you had a great weekend. Again, miss you guys so much. But I will see you on Wednesday. And remember that we do have a map test on Wednesday, so make sure you're reviewing your map. If you've been doing your bell works, been doing those, turning those in, and doing them seriously, the map test should literally be a breeze. So just get ready for that. Remember, there won't be any sort of word bank because we never have one of those. So don't count on that. So today we're going to talk Northern Europe. Remember on Friday we talked Western Europe, which the main players there are kind of France, Germany, kind of deal with issues relating to the fact that they're not really unified, at least for Germany. A lot of their time they're not unified, and then when they do become unified, it's like almost too much and too much nationalism, and so it ends up being kind of a bad thing. And so now they face kind of like, it's almost like an identity crisis. Like, well, who should we be? Like, should we be hardcore German, or is that like not okay? So, that's kind of the problems that they're facing. Gonna move into Northern Europe today, like I said. And what we'll see with Northern Europe is they're gonna be huge as far as like United Kingdom, Scandinavia, which is like Norway, Sweden, Finland. Those are gonna be your big players. And we're gonna see that most of these countries are going to be kind of ahead of the game. Like, while everybody else has got like a dictatorship or like an absolute monarchy and like life is like just not that great, you're gonna see that like Norway, Sweden, Finland, United Kingdom, they've got a constitutional monarchy, so like they've got a little bit of say in their government, and a little bit of say goes a long way. It's like a nice thing for people. So this is the region that we are kind of mainly talking about when we say Northern Europe. Gotta throw in Iceland. They gotta fit somewhere, right? And so if you would like, and what I would recommend is for you to go ahead and shade in that area of your map on your guided notes today. So you're going to want to shade in Iceland, all of this area of Great Britain. They kind of get a different little thing on this map, but we're going to put all of them into Northern Europe. So all of this area of Great Britain, Denmark, Norway, Sweden, and Finland. So those will be the countries that we are talking about when we're saying Northern Europe. And then there's only one left for tomorrow, and that's a big ol' region with a lot of little countries. But we'll deal with them when we get there. So for right now, Iceland, British Isles, Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Denmark. Alright, so moving along. What we're going to see is like they've got a lot of coastline in this region, so I'm going to go back for a second. A lot of water surrounding these places, and so it makes sense that these countries would be engaging in a lot of exploration. They are sailing around and they're like using how good their navies are to their advantage. We're going to see that for some point in time, Great Britain is just not Great Britain. They're not even England. The Romans are able to invade all the way in there, and then the Germanic peoples are able to kind of get in there. And so if you're Great Britain for a while, you're just not. We see that the Vikings from like Scandinavia come in, invade Great Britain. So again, you're like, man, when are things going to get better? They actually go to Iceland and Greenland, and remember the story behind Iceland and Greenland is that the Vikings wanted to trick people, and so they named Iceland, which was really nice, and pleasant. They named it Iceland, so nobody would go there and take their nice and pleasant land. And they named Greenland Greenland, and Greenland is pretty much all ice. Greenland is like cold and like uninhabitable. So I think the Vikings, the Scandinavians, are like, jokes on them. Jokes on anyone who tries to take what we found. And they're also going to sail to kind of North America by way of like Canada. They're gonna kind of find themselves there as well as kind of having a presence in Normandy, France, and it's part of Russia. So the Vikings are like all over the place, very big presence. And remember, they're actually the ones, or they're the Europeans that find North America, that find the new continent, the new world, long, long time before Christopher Columbus does. Long, long time. Well, what we're going to see, another place where Great Britain gets pushed around, is by this guy, William the Conqueror. So William the Conqueror from Normandy, which is kind of northern France. And he decides to invade Great Britain, right? They're weak, everybody else was doing it, and so I'm going to do it too. So I got a real beef with William the Conqueror, because to invade Britain and to kind of take over and win out, he killed, wait for it, Harold Godwinson. Harold Godwinson, right? Somehow, some way, this dude has got to be related to me, Miss Godwin. Shot him. Well, he didn't, but Harold Godwinson got killed by way of getting shot in the eye with an arrow. Didn't end well for him. So we're actually going to watch a little video, a song relating to this battle of Hastings in 1066, where William the Conqueror wins out, and he's actually he and his French speakers actually kind of changed the English language a little bit, and kind of influenced the English language a little bit, which is another cool thing. Like, it's cool to think about like how certain words you're like, oh well, I know what that means because it sounds similar to English. Well, this is one of the reasons why some words sound similar to English. Here's somewhere in here, so this is in not the Bayeux Tapestry, but in a tapestry where it's supposed to be depicting Harold Godwinson getting killed, and I'm assuming this is him. I don't really know what kind of clothes they're wearing, what the situation is there, but old Harold, R.I.P. man. Think y'all will like this, but also simultaneously hate this and hate this for this lady. But it's a pretty funny little video.
Back in 1066, yeah. Edward the Confessor, he had no kids. Yeah, the English throne became a huge conflict. Yeah, till Harold took in the Earl of Wessex. Yeah, Battle of Hastings. Tapestry, its length in meters measures 70. Embroidered linen tells a story. The feats of William, Duke of Normandy. Battle of Hastings. So girl, no men invasion, but feudalism. No men invasion, but feudalism. tapestry. Its length in meters measures 70. Embroidered linen tells a story. The feats of William, Duke of Normandy. So, girl, no man invasion, but feudalism. 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 No man invasion, 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 no man invasion. Vous êtes feliz? Ah oui. Vous êtes feliz? Mais oui. That year on Christmas Day, yeah, William was coronated, he would reign, yeah, 21 years playing the feudal game, yeah, he made a tax record called Domesday, yeah, William the Conqueror, so girl, no man invasion, but feudalism, 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 no man invasion, 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 no man invasion. Vous êtes feliz? Ah oui. Vous êtes feliz? Ah oui. Vous êtes feliz? Ah oui.
If you remember nothing else, you better not forget this thing was 1066 after the time she said it. You guys know I always like to watch those. Maybe they just make me feel better about myself. So 1066, the Normans come in and they're able to kind of beat out the British, at least for a little bit, with the help of William the Conqueror and the death of poor Harold Godwinson. So sad. What you're gonna see is, as far as like Scandinavia goes, they all become pretty big kingdoms. So like Denmark, Sweden, Norway, they become pretty big. There's not really like a Finland yet, and they never become like super powerful. So like Norway and Sweden especially, like they help other countries like fight battles, and they're involved in conflict in Europe, but they're not really like super powerful empires. Like if you're gonna say a powerful empire in Europe, you're just not gonna say Sweden. Maybe you would, but it would be a little bit wrong. What we'll see is eventually England's gonna come back under control of like the British land, so like that includes like Wales, Ireland, Scotland, and they actually become Great Britain, and then they become the United Kingdom in the 1800s, early 1800s. What you're gonna see is after 1066, the British are kind of like, hey, we don't like being messed with. We don't like people invading us. They just have done it over and over and over again, whether it's, you know, the Vikings or the French or whoever else. And we don't like that. We don't like being pushed around. And so they basically ramp up, like, we're going to build up our navy. We're going to, like, make sure our island's safe. And even though we're a small island, we're going to be powerful. And what you're going to see is after they handle that and nobody's coming in, like, trying to get at them, Great Britain's like, hey, you know what we can do now is we can start building up. We don't have to just have a really small empire. And so that becomes kind of a focus of Great Britain, is building up a huge empire. So taking land in, the Americas and Asia and Africa and Oceania. And I know I said this to somebody last week. Oceania is like Australia and kind of the islands around that. So Australia, New Zealand, like Papua New Guinea. And the British Empire grows in such a vast way that it kind of becomes the thing to say the sun never sets on the British Empire. So literally it's so far spread out across the earth and across the globe that literally it's always sunny at some point. And the sun is always shining at some part on some part of the British Empire. So that's at least it's at least a pretty like cool thing to be able to say, that the sun never sets on the British Empire. And you'll actually notice there's a little world map below this, right? Yeah. On your notes for today. And so I want you to take your pencil and kind of shade what part of the world, and it doesn't have to be exact, shade what part of the world that the British Empire has. What does it mean for the sun to never set on the British Empire? And here's what that kind of looks like for us. So all that red, y'all, all the red in the 1920s, that is British land. So literally, the sun at no point in time, it's so spread out. It's not going to truly set on the British Empire. It will always be shining on some part of it. So that's, like I said, that's a pretty cool claim. That's a pretty cool thing to say. So I would take a moment and shade these in. So like Canada, you don't have to get these exact islands over here. Don't worry about that. This little part right here. I think this is, I guess, French Guiana before it's French Guiana. So it's British Guiana. You can see that. Few of these places in Western Africa, and then a lot of Southern Africa, Sudan, Kenya, Tanzania. This is Zimbabwe right here, and Botswana, Namibia, South Africa, kind of the Arabian Peninsula over here, as well as Iraq, Pakistan, and India. Few islands over here, so Malaysia, Papua New Guinea, Australia, and New Zealand. And you can see specifically, like with Australia and New Zealand, the impact of the British just even in their flags, because in that top left corner of their flag, they've got the little Union Jack on them, which is the English flag or the British flag. So take a few moments to kind of just shade in as best as you can. I don't want to expect you to get it perfect, but this kind of give you an idea of like this is how big the British Empire was. So they go from kind of being bullied by all those people to being super powerful and being really powerful today. Really powerful country today. All right, y'all. So hopefully you've gotten it. And if I'm going too fast ever, I apologize. It's really weird recording these by myself with nobody to kind of see how long you guys need. But any questions you have, I can always answer on Wednesday. So don't stress about that. As far as what things look like today for Northern Europe, I think it's kind of important to think about, like, again, like I said, like, they're ahead of the game. They're kind of setting the stage with what's the best type of government. And it's a government that represents the people in some way, shape, or form. So, like, Great Britain and England wasn't always, like, kind of a republic like we are. Didn't always have, like, a bunch of branches of government. but something that they've almost always had in Great Britain is a parliament. And even though a long while ago, the parliament only had like rich white guys on it, it was at least something that represented more than just like one king's opinion. And so that's kind of cool there, is that it represented more people. And as years and years go by, it's going to represent more and more and more people. And we're going to see the Scandinavian countries are going to have kind of similar things where we're representing more people. So that's always cool. And what's kind of cool is 1215, as early as that, the Magna Carta, which is probably something you've heard of, but maybe just don't really know what it did. That's the thing that says trial by jury. So not just doing just random trials. That's not allowed. Even though, not to sound bad, you're still going to have plenty of people in England do that. So kind of sketchy. No taxation without representation. That's going to be a kind of interesting thing thinking about the American Revolution. But those are also going to be ideas that spread to like the United States, to the colonies in the U.S. They're like, hey, no taxation without representation. That's the big thing, right? So that's going to be something. It's like you can't have representative government and then your colonies like, have like a dictatorship or like be controlling them really tightly. You're also going to see the Industrial Revolution that begins in this region of Europe. So it begins in Northern Europe and Great Britain. They've got all these goods and all these natural resources and their economy's doing well. So they're like, well, like what can we do? How can we make things better? Sorry, that's my doggy again. How can we make things better? And so Industrial Revolution is a huge part of that. So first that kind of helps them do agriculture a little better, but then that helps them kind of make things faster, and it starts out being like kind of gross and grody, and there'd always be like kind of gray skies in Great Britain, and people would get really, really hurt, really, really bad. But it's also going to be something that kind of leads to better rights for people in the long run, and better working conditions, wages in the long run. At first, it really just sucks. You're also going to see something else going on is after World War II, your British colonies start to become independent. So basically, like Great Britain's like, all right, we're not your boss anymore. And they just up and leave. And so think about like what's going to happen if the British had set up like a government in, let's say, Namibia, and they're just like, peace out, have a great time without us. What's going to happen? It's going to be like kind of chaos because they're like, well, who's in charge? What do we do now? And so it's really just not fair for these countries like Great Britain, like Germany, like Spain, Italy, whoever else, to just France to be like, hey, deuces, have a great time, good luck. Because you kind of started the mess. You got to sometimes clean it up, I think. And we'll talk a little bit more about like that situation, this last bullet. We'll talk about that when we kind of move into continent of Africa. We'll talk about it in a major way. So kind of something to look forward to. But that'll be all the way in next year. Whoa! Here's this little depiction portraying the Industrial Revolution in Great Britain. As you can see, it looks a little smoggy. Lots of coal being burned, and so there's actually a scene in, I think, Wonder Woman that came out. Like, they're rolling into Great Britain, and she's like, ew, like, it looks gross. And the dude's like, yeah, it's not for everyone. It would have looked really gross. So that's actually kind of cool because that's historically accurate there at that time period. As far as other things going on, what else is the situation? Things that are going well for these regions. good vehicle and kind of aerospace being any sort of like flight industries. Produce a lot of paper, a lot of food products, a lot of medicines. And these countries are still going to like play on what's around them. Well, we've got a lot of water, so let's fish. Let's produce sea oil. Or not produce, harness sea oil under our seas. Let's utilize all these forests we have and start cutting down, getting timber. A lot of your technology comes from the British region, from Great Britain, from the United Kingdom, coming from Ireland and Scotland. And so it's another thing that maybe you don't think of, because think about, where do we think most of the technology comes from? My mind usually goes like China and Japan, and not Ireland and Scotland, but a lot of the technology, at least used in Europe, comes from Northern Europe. And then finally, Northern Europe, thinking about, and a big thing to think about is, how do they feel about the European Union? And we already kind of know, so jot down on that sheet, how does Great Britain feel about the European Union? Well, how do they feel, guys? They left. They voted to leave the European Union, so they're out of it. And they never liked kind of having just the euro anyway. They were like, the pound is worth more, so why would we go down? Or why would we try to pick y'all up and carry y'all on our back? And here's actually something that kind of talks about, so it talks about reasons why the British would leave the European Union, but keep in mind, we know that they've already left. So this is same reasons, but we know the outcome.
By 2017, the United Kingdom is expected to hold a referendum to decide whether or not to remain a member of the European Union. The UK has been a part of the EU since 1973 and decided to remain a member state after a referendum in 1975. So why does the UK want to leave the EU? Well, Prime Minister David Cameron has said that the EU imposes too many restrictions on British lawmakers. Critics say that the UK will be forced to abandon its pound currency and adopt the euro currency, which has historically been the weaker of the two. Adoption of the euro is expected of all EU countries by the year 2020, but many are worried that the euro is not only unstable, but able to be influenced by weaker countries like Greece. The UK is also concerned about European restrictions imposed on their immigration laws. The EU currently provides the ability for migrants to access employment and benefits. However, the British Prime Minister has been working to restrict benefits and housing to those who have been in the country for at least 4 years. This proposal has been directly opposed by the European Commission, leading many Britons to question why the EU has so much say in British welfare. Some conservative groups feel like Europe is manipulating the British government, and that policymakers have lost control over trade, human rights, and migration. EU law is supreme over UK law, meaning that lawmakers in the British House of Commons are technically beholden to those in the European Parliament in Brussels. Anti-EU activists believe that European regulations will undermine British interests. So how would a British exit affect both the EU and the UK? Well, analysts say it could join Norway, Iceland, and Liechtenstein in direct single market access. This would be enacted per the existing agreement on the European Economic Area. Many trade regulations would remain the same without imposing the same export and import tariffs as non-EU countries. However, it wouldn't help the UK's issues with free movement of labor, which is still guaranteed in the EEA agreement. It would also slow investment in the UK, which would no longer be seen as an entryway into EU trade. Similarly, the EU would lose some of its clout as one of its largest economic and political heavyweights goes off on its own. But all of this is based on who you ask. At the moment, the EU and UK are in talks to resolve their differences. But if they can't come to a solution, the scheduled referendum will likely take place. Overall, the United Kingdom hasn't made up its mind on the EU yet, and it will take the upcoming referendum to solve the question once and for all. Greece has also threatened to leave the Eurozone,
like I said, we already
raising the question of whether being an EU member is even...
that the UK has left, so that's kind of like, we know that happened, and we know that's kind of out of the way, taken care of. A few other modern things I think to realize. United Kingdom, very, very diverse, especially the city of London. You've got a big growing like Islamic population. You have a big just group of different ethnicities and religions. So it's a really cool makeup in this region in London. Um, Typically, like Scandinavia and Denmark, you got like one ethnic group. You got like one ethnic group that's not just like straight up white, but like it's white people um, that are like native to that region. You know, their families have always been there. As far as like languages, a lot of the language is similar, kind of except for like Britain. That's kind of its own thing, and then Scandinavia is a different thing. Um, Most of the region's Protestant, so most of Scandinavia is Protestant. Whereas Ireland is kind of the big, big Catholic country, and then England is, or Great Britain's like Anglican, like Church of England. As far as culture goes, a lot of literature, that was kind of like instead of artwork, that was the big thing that England did, Great Britain did. So like England has like William Shakespeare, Charlotte Bronte. You guys probably don't know her. She wrote, I believe it was Jane Eyre. Not that good of a book in my opinion, but that's okay. James Joyce writes a lot of short stories or wrote a lot of short stories. So those are kind of some well-known people. Obviously, Shakespeare is like the most well-known dude of all those people. Um, Kind of some things going on. I think this is probably the most fun thing about this region. So obviously, it's really cool that like a lot of your Scandinavian countries, like Norway, Sweden, Finland, a pretty good amount of women in their parliaments. So power to the ladies, right? Um, they've got pretty good amount of women, and so they're kind of representing their population a little bit more equally, which is pretty cool. Um, these countries, these nations are really, really proud of their like social welfare of their like health programs. That was actually something in the 2012 London Olympics and the opening ceremony that Great Britain like showcased. They were like, "Hey, look, here's our, um, basically health program, and here's how we take care of everybody." And they were kind of touting that, and so very, very proud of those things, and they have a lot of them. Um, some things that are kind of always true, like for the British, like tea is a big thing. It's always been a big thing, and that's not like, they're not going to be like, oh, I have to have my afternoon tea, but that's something that's just kind of done. Or saunas in Finland, or smorgasbord in Swedish. Those are kind of like traditional customs that anyone from those countries, like they would know, they would have had partaken in, or like they would know what you're talking about. As far as leisure, like for Scandinavia or the Nordic countries, a lot of outdoor sports are big, so like they're really, really good. You'll notice like in the Olympics they kill it. A lot of those Scandinavian countries, Norway, Sweden, Finland, like in the skating, in a lot of the like cross country skiing. So actually keep an eye out for that, because the Winter Olympics will start really soon. I don't know if they start officially in January. I guess they start in January, but keep an eye out on that. Keep an eye out on Norway, Sweden, Finland. Look for them and be like, oh, they're doing this thing and they're doing really well at it. Whereas the British, not so much on the like cold outdoor sports. They're more, I think, for is like Olympic style sports like horseback riding. They're really good at rowing, and kind of just the random sports here and there. They created rugby, created cricket, which are two very, very popular sports around the world. in sports that they're good at. But I think a lot of countries are kind of catching up with them. Not us, not the U.S. for those two sports. We are not very good at rugby. I mean, we've got a team, but you can ask Mr. Ballard. We could be a whole lot better for sure. Tomorrow, we will finally finish off this kind of history overview. And thank you guys for sticking with me. I know it's not always fun to be taking so many notes, but we're kind of getting them out of the way. And we're not going to do a hyperdoc this time. So like these are your notes for this unit and for, the test that we'll have. So thank you for sticking with me. We'll talk Eastern Europe tomorrow, finish up the regions of Europe, get them out of the way. Hope you have a great day today, guys.